What's happening, Reject Nation? Greg and John here today. As per usual, we are late to covering something because I was gone this morning. The Rockstars has dropped their Marvel Easter eggs and breakdown for What If Episode 4. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? And what is the best episode of What If so far? I'm very excited to check this out. As we were watching that episode, I was like, I cannot wait for a new Rockstars breakdown of this. Let's just get into it.
Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Eric Voss, and this is a breakdown of Marvel Studios' What If Episode 4. What if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? And what if we all lost our minds with this tragic horror of an episode, unafraid to sentence its hero to bleak consequences? My favorite episode of the series yet, and not just because it had like 20 Mephistos in it, if you could even call them that, but because this episode was filled with beautiful imagery and concepts that are fascinating to break down, but you gotta do it frame by frame. And I'm gonna do that and point out all the animation details and Easter eggs that you might have overlooked. We open with the outline of the Watcher, but notice how we see more of his body than usual. In fact, he's made more and more appearances with each new episode of the season, as if getting closer and closer to finally intervening. But by the end of this episode, we do actually see his full flesh before he reverts to his astral silhouette.
I love that about this episode because the Watcher in this one, he's always been just a narrator, and he's just sort of felt that way, and I thought that in this episode they really made him become a character this time around. It gets you excited at the thought of like, ooh, what happens when he finally gets involved? Because you know he's bound to at some point get involved.
Yeah, probably next week.
Like a judge who abides by habeas corpus to render a guilty verdict in person before returning to his chambers. He says,
what if the best of intentions has very strange consequences?
It's me in every relationship.
Yeah, that music was Michael Giacchino's Doctor Strange theme, which comes back throughout this episode.
Where am I? The Ancient One warned us. If we save Christine, we destroy the world.
Benedict Cumberbatch and Rachel McAdams return to voice Stephen Strange and Christine Palmer.
I love how Doctor Strange looks so much like Benedict Cumberbatch, but Christine, I'm like,
it could be anybody.
It could be any woman at that point. Yeah. I thought Rachel McAdams did an excellent job in there, and I care more for Christine in this episode than I do in the movie. Yeah, I mean, on the animation, I'm like, oh, dang, that looks exactly like Rachel McAdams, but Benedict Cumberbatch is like right on track.
Come on, cut the preamble. Let's just get straight to the heart of it.
Choice words for a doctor who spends this episode trying to awaken his dead loved one, the heart that he lost. Now, in the 2016 film, Strange invited Christine to a speaking engagement.
I'm talking tonight at a neurological society dinner. Come with me.
Another speaking engagement? So romantic.
You used to love coming to those things with me.
But here the event seems like a different one that's a celebration in Strange's honor.
We need to celebrate this.
We are.
You performed a radical hemispherectomy.
It could be another variance, or maybe one of those prior dates when Strange and Christine were still together. Also, we should point out that a hemispherectomy is where half the brain is removed or disconnected from its other half in order to treat seizures and epilepsy, which is quite similar to the way the Ancient One splits the halves of Doctor Strange's identity and mind. Now, the wreck is caused by slightly different conditions. Like here, Strange tries to pass a semi-truck and nearly collides head-on with a car, swerves back into his lane, but then gets rear-ended. In the film, he passes a car and collides with it while distracted, but still the wreck itself goes down exactly the same way, frame by frame, even spinning into a pole and then flipping on its front end into a fence before teetering down into the water. Strange cries over Christine while framed in this broken glass of the back windshield. If you think about it, this whole series depicts the multiverse as shards of broken glass.
Oh,
and at the end of this episode, after Strange has allowed his universe to melt away, he is trapped inside a condensed prism of shards, crying once more alone.
So
this
beautifully
shot here in a
symbolic.
crashed car foreshadows Strange's tragic destiny. Strange
It's like the negative space around
but
it.
this version of Strange has not had his hands damaged, which in the films was his unhealable wound, with that tremble even persisting all the way through Avengers Endgame. But you'll notice, not in the trailer for Spider-Man No Way Home. Got a theory for that, keep that in mind for later. But still having his hands allows Stephen Strange to surpass the mastery of of his film version. And this guy never having a constant reminder of his arrogant mistake to ground him in that guilt. Instead, he feels like the universe stole something from him.
Well, in all fairness, he learned how to be a Sorcerer Supreme just as quick in the What If episode as he did in the movie, right?
Yeah, true. A couple montages and we got there. Yeah.
That was one of the complaints that you heard all throughout the first Doctor Strange movie when that came out. I was like, oh, he's learned really quick how to become this good. It's a little more justified in this universe because his hands are actually working.
Strange discovers
The Eye of Agamotto, cradle of the temporal singularity, discovered by Cagliostro, manipulation and alteration of timelines.
Yes, the temporal singularity, of course, referring to the time stone. The word singularity coming from Wong's recap in Infinity War of the stones being the singularities from the Big Bang. As in the film, Strange uses the time stone to unwind and rewind the bites of an apple, and he is caught in the act by Wong and the Ancient One, with Benedict Wong and Tilda Swinton returning.
Tinkering with time can weaken the very fabric of the universe.
We protect reality. We don't threaten it.
But in the film, Mordo joined Wong in admonishing Strange. But
Oh,
Mordo
yeah,
was
where's
mysteriously
Mordo?
absent from this episode? They didn't even bring in a
That's
guest
true.
voice actor to try to emulate Chiwetel Ejiofor like they normally do for actors they can't get back in there. Not sure why, but without this scolding conscience, it does
biding his
unleash
time.
Strange to go further with his sorcery than he would otherwise.
You know, a lot of people were thinking that Mordo was gonna be, nope, can't.
As in the film, the Ancient One dies and Strange bargains with Dormammu and becomes the Sorcerer Supreme, but now he uses the Time Stone to return to the night of Christine's death. Now, compared to the time travel logic of Loki in Endgame, Doctor Strange's Time Stone magic seems limited to within his timeline. Like, he doesn't create branch timelines so much as he relives history within his timeline by reversing time and creating time loops. Definitely seems more limited in scope compared to the more technological quantum approach to
Those
time travel
paperweights.
used by Kang, the TVA, and the Avengers, who, when they alter time, create branch timelines. This could be why the TVA showed us the Infinity Stones, from their point of view, as powerless outside of their home timelines. But since we stay within Doctor Strange's timeline here, this time stone is infinitely powerful. And Strange creates a new loop point that begins with Christine at the car, similar to how he used a time loop to torture Dormammu, but here Strange creates this Groundhog Day scenario to essentially torture himself, really, which is ironic because Dormammu was Benedict Cumberbatch with his voice and performed via mocap. All of this plays out like the heartbreaking montage in Groundhog Day when Bill Murray tries over and over to save a dying homeless man. A sequence that always makes me tear up because he calls him Pop and Dad. He goes to the extent of thinking himself as a doctor, demanding to see the guy's chart, the way Doctor Strange arrogantly refuses to let his patient die. There's a moment where Strange seats Christine in the car on one loop. Watcher's reflection appears beside him, but notice how Strange blinks, almost seeming to sense him. But no matter what, in this montage, death on wheels always seems to come for Regina George. I actually theorize that each of these fateful deaths could have been sent by Strange's future Strange Supreme form, trying to fix his own mess and force his past self to move on. Because notice the vagrant who randomly shoots in the pizza shop for no reason. That guy's face is only shown from afar and here in shadow, because that could be the face of that Strange Supreme, unrecognizable to his past self.
I think you're reaching a little bit there.
I don't think it's him. Maybe he said the guy.
And then if you slow down, the dude actually has a brown hand.
Oh no.
And if we're gonna pick apart people's forearms and trailers, we're gonna pick apart this shadow of a face, I'm gonna say Doctor Strange clearly has white hands.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He's not gotten a tan since he picked up that gun. And if you look in the profile, his beard looks much more like Tony Stark's beard. Probably in this universe.
It was Tony Stark is not a billionaire playboy.
Yeah.
He's a bum.
He's a bum and he needs to resort to crime to make his living.
Even when Strange stands her up, she still dies in a building fire.
Reports of numerous casualties, including the death of one Dr. Christine Palmer.
Surgeon file photo, ready to go while the building's still blazing. Okay. Actually, that reporter is Christine Everhart.
She just keeps coming back.
Damn, dude.
She comes back more than Mordo.
Blue portal, which compared to the golden sparkle portals normally used by sorcerers, might indicate a higher form of magic, allowing one to traverse timelines or dimensions or realms, like the blue portal Captain Carter and the tentacle monster went through, and the blue color Christine glows when Strange resurrects her at the end of the episode. Now the Ancient One would still be alive at this point in the timeline, right? Because the night of Christine's death, the Ancient One was still living. But the fact that she uses this blue portal is just interesting to note, because she is someone who has seen every part of her life and every part of her timeline. She seems to have an omniscience to her, and she could be coming to Strange through another realm. And she explains,
her death is an absolute point in time.
Absolute.
Unchangeable. Unmovable.
Okay, so absolute points, a kind of new rule in the MCU's ever-expanding timeline logic that I'm sure some folks might debate whether or not applies to the live-action MCU titles, but for now, I
don't think too much into it.
Again, in Endgame, both past tragedies could be altered or subverted, but doing so would result in the creation of a branch timeline. Thanos' snap, though, could not be prevented. It could be practically undone by extracting Infinity Stones from the past and using them to snap everyone back in the present, though the world still had to live with the consequences of some people living 5 years more than others, the sudden population change from snaps. That seemed like it could have been an absolute point that they just kind of had to work around. But now we are learning that some events are considered absolute points. They are fixed, load-bearing, watershed moments that cannot be erased. These could be anchor points that were placed in the timeline by whatever version of Kang in order to maintain stability to that universe's sacred timeline. So in this episode, when Strange eventually forces Christine's survival, he violates the natural limits of his time stone, and he breaks the absolute point of that timeline, careening the timeline into a chaotic branch beyond the timeline logic that his time stone could have any control over. It's like the darkest timeline that the Ancient One warned Bruce Banner about in Endgame.
In this new branch reality, without our chief weapon against the forces of darkness, our world would be overrun. Millions will suffer.
Which the Ancient One in this episode echoes.
This path only leads to darkness and the end of this reality.
The darkness on that hypothetical branch that she talked about in Endgame could have meant that the branch would eventually self-prune by melting away into this cosmic sludge.
Oh shit! That was good
that
call.
I really like, because for one, it contrasts the dry, dusty aesthetic of Infinity War, but also evokes the more dark matter that makes up the borders of this reality, and in the medium of comics and classic animation, the ink that these characters are literally drawn in.
Oh, it's wow. You know, I'm just gonna give a round of applause there. I thought that was brilliant.
Really beautiful, yeah.
That was
very
amazing.
enriching detail there.
As confusing as the timeline stuff can get from, if you like really think about it from time to time, because they're not only dealing with like the rules of the logic of the timeline, whatever, you go back to, oh yeah, there's also that guy, He Who Remains, who made all this happen in Rome. Like, I keep forgetting that he's like in charge of this at this point in the story or whatever.
Yeah. He would be policing all these activities, yeah.
But then to connect it with exchange of dialogue in Avengers Endgame, this episode being a foreshadowing event of what she was warning about, not only in this episode, but also in Endgame, just adds further more significance and importance to this specific episode of Marvel's What If. And then also with the visual parallels too, like you were drawing there, so beautiful for like the animated format to go back to the black ink. I don't know how literal all this was meant to be in the sense of like, were the filmmakers or the creators, the artists thinking about all this when they were doing it? You make a damn strong, compelling argument as to why. I thought that was beautifully put.
It all lines up, yeah.
But as we move on from this, remember, Christine Palmer's death is only an absolute point in this universe, not the universe of the primary MCU. Because she's still alive in the primary MCU, we're all still fine. So this would suggest that different universes are structured with different absolute points, that Kang timeline scribe considered to be unchangeable. So the Ancient One attacks Strange to keep him from going further, and notice how her spell explodes in a white impact blast. I love when the show does this. It's really fun to pause at the right moment. Like, first she does it when she brings the edges of her runic fans together, and then when it hits Strange. It creates this one black line where he was standing, representing how the Ancient One just split his soul in half. So Strange thinks he survived it, going to the distant past to the library of Cagliostro before this library was lost, alongside several other ancient libraries, like the burning of the Library of Alexandria. In this case, Cagliostro was an actual real person in history, but in the lore of Marvel Comics, he was an ancient Italian sorcerer, and it was his spells of the Book of Cagliostro, the spellbook in the 2016 film. Strange is greeted by Obeng, voiced by Ike Amati, and he later implies to Strange that he is not himself Cagliostro, but in fact, in the comics, Obeng is the possible real-life name of the actual Cagliostro. And notice how he has one blue eye and one reddish-brown eye.
What's going on
Maybe
there?
a clue that Strange is here in a split reality, split between a place where his eyes stay clear blue and another place where his eyes go darker and at times red. dead. The lost library of Cagliostro is beautiful inside and out. The facade of it has carvings of winged griffins and then is flanked by larger sphinxes. The sphinx is a mythological being who posed the riddle which creature has one voice and yet becomes 4-footed and then 2-footed and 3-footed. The answer being man, who crawls on all fours as a baby, walks on 2 feet as an adult, and uses a walking stick in old age, which you could see reflecting Strange's journey as a man, on a literal sense, taking multi-limbed forms, but also lives throughout centuries as Obang ages into an old man who cannot stand on his 2 feet. As he tries to go inside, Strange encounters all these protective runes, much like the ones Wanda and Agatha used against each other in WandaVision. Wizards love runes. And Obang greets him.
Sorcerer Armani?
No, it's Strange.
Not any stranger than any other name in this world.
Calling back the name wordplay that Caecilius had with them in the 2016 film.
How long have you been at Kamatage, Mr.
Doctor.
Mr. Doctor?
It's Strange.
Maybe. Who am I to judge?
Inside the library of Cagliostro, Strange finds the book on time manipulation. This is the same book of Cagliostro from the Camertage library that we saw in Doctor Strange. It has the same cover, but this would be hundreds of years earlier before it ended up in Camertage. The page he actually opens up to are the same pages that Caecilius tore out of the book in the 2016 film, and you can see that same dark dimension symbol, the one that Caecilius conjures in the church, and it appeared on his and the Ancient One's foreheads, because the Ancient One would draw power from the dark dimension. That's why she was called a hypocrite. Learning that he has to absorb other entities, Strange attempts to absorb the freaking same interdimensional tentacle monster from episode 1.
Is it the same exact one?
I speculated then that this could be one of the Elder Gods, aka the many angled ones like Shuma Gorath, who is speculated to appear in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. This is a huge deal that it came back, because other than the Watcher himself, this is a first example of continuity on this series. And since the trailer showed that one image of Captain Carter meeting the Strange Supreme,
I thought Peggy Carter like defeated it, right? Didn't he like slice him up and stuff?
His tentacles up,
and then came back here. Wouldn't it be like an alternate version still?
I guess theoretically, I mean, maybe on the Peggy Carter timeline, we're meeting a different Dark Doctor Strange in the remnants, because like at least in the freeze frame they pull, it seems like there might be some kind of tentacular carcass behind them or something.
Because to be fair, in the Marvel comics, there's like multiple tentacles.
There's a lot of tentacles. There's a lot of tentacles.
It's likely, but I mean, to say it's the same one in terms of continuity, I don't know if I would call it exactly continuity, because like Nick Fury and Hawkeye were in the first episode, but those are clearly different versions in the third one.
Yeah, it seems like it would be a variant of the same being, if anything.
I think we can expect a later episode this season to confirm what exactly this monster is. And keep in mind that we may only be seeing this entity's bottom half. And Shang-Chi promotional footage seems to be showing some massive tentacled entity in that movie's final battle. We'll know more after Shang-Chi comes out, but there could be a connection between these two. Obang says,
Mystic beings
no comment.
Do not bark.
I don't know what you're talking about.
A very weird thing to say, because yeah, Dormammu totally did bargain, at least eventually after being worn down, unless you consider that the deal Strange made with Dormammu might have not been a deal in Strange's favor, but a curse that Dormammu might have benefited from. Strange starts smaller this time with an evil little gnome, and then an insect whom he sends back, but takes its cloak of levitation, meaning that this might have been some alternate variant in a reality that was a sorcerer. And you'll notice that this cloak has a darker color and golden lining, similar to the flesh of that insect himself. He then absorbs a cosmic six-eyed bird, whom he strips of its feathers, and then a dragon that I guess you could say looks a bit like the Great Protector of Shang-Chi. That dragon turns his skin red and gives him horns, making Strange look a bit like, we have to admit, Mephisto. Because this is followed by a freaking double-headed goat, like the skull we saw in Agatha Harkness's Satanic Dungeon, and then this laughing humanoid being with a skull head, a cape, and with antlers, and then a snarling bat demon.
Marvel does not want us to drop the Mephisto theories, okay?
They don't.
Like, I know there's so many people who are sick of it. I'm sick of hearing about this Mephisto. He's not coming. But then why does Marvel keep doing devil things and then going literal devil? Spider-Man No Way Home trailer has that with Stranger, like, but Mephisto's the one who really made the deal in the comic. And then this happens. Marvel doesn't want us to quit.
it.
They don't want it. They like it. They like it.
They're aware.
Now, this episode never explicitly calls any of these entities Mephisto. Of course it didn't. But this demonic imagery alone dispels that stupid myth that people keep throwing at me that Disney will never put demons in their properties, as if Fantasia and Hocus Pocus never happened, or WandaVision with its witches and Book of the Damned. And by absorbing these things, Strange gains enough power to be able to perceive past reality to the form of the Watcher, which is the kind of reality bending abilities normally reserved for entities like Mephisto.
But the fate of his universe is not worth risking the safety of all others. Besides, I doubt he'd listen.
Hello? Who's that?
So, Mephisto confirmed? Well, no, of course not. Not yet, technically. But this is the kind of supernatural evil within Strange's consciousness that I mentioned in my recent video that makes it at least more likely that Doctor Strange in No Way Home or Multiverse of Madness could be influenced by Mephisto. And since in that No Way Home footage, Strange's hand is not scarred and does not tremble, I am wondering if that could be the Strange from this reality. A theory I go much more into in our episode of Inside Marvel.
I mean, I guess what I would have to see, because they bring up the point about how there's that released image, Strange and Peggy Carter interacting with each other. We need to see what the progression is of Strange before landing on that theory being there, because unless he was able to absorb all the memories or something like that of our Doctor Strange, because he says, like, we saved half the universe together, which this version of Strange never had that event happen. You know, and it's easier to believe he could absorb the memories and whatever. I don't think that's likely.
I think the MCU Mephisto is going to be ultimately just a warped Doctor Strange now.
Now the next absorbed demons include this evil elk that makes Strange grow antlers, giving him a silhouette of Hela, another dragon who makes Strange's face stretch out into a snout, a demon wolf with weirdly a pierced ear, and then a snake that turns Strange into a snake that still has his hair. Yikes. But then we gotta look at these flashes of body horror that go by real fast. You gotta go through frame by frame. First, there's Strange in this thick boy red Hellboy style demon form who sprouts a second head, then Strange made of this yellowy waxy substance, then Strange in an insectoid form with antenna and barbed appendages, and then fascinatingly Strange with the facial texture in the eyes of Dormammu.
Holy shit.
A third eye on his forehead. Could throughout this process Strange have at some point absorbed Dormammu as well? He transforms into a snarling fanged Strange with rows of glowing eyes, who then turns back into Strange's semi-normal head, but his skin cracking like a paper lantern burning from the inside. Meanwhile, the time-lapse outside the library shows the lush greenery wilting away from the cliffside as hundreds of years have passed. So then Strange re-summons that tentacle monster from the beginning, this time slicing off its limbs and absorbing them into his flesh, ending with this gross neck snap. Now, it's interesting how the creature's tentacles still have some life in them, even after they were cut off, which could mean that when those severed parts came back through the portal with Captain Carter in episode 1, those pieces could still be dangerous to Peggy and the others of that universe. A bang reveals that Strange Supreme was merely one half of himself in a split reality, and then we jump back to his other side, who has moved on from Christine, but Strange sees that this reality is melting into the inky sludge, and the Ancient One arrives to explain what's going on.
Hello, Stephen. No, whoa, wait a minute, you're...
Dead? Yes.
So this must be...
A psychic impression sent through a splinter in reality. Just think of me as an echo.
Now you may ask, why is the Ancient One ghostly now, but in a more living form when she appeared to Strange before? Well, before, the Ancient One would have been alive at that point in Strange's time loop in early 2016. And because she is all-knowing, she just knew the implications of what Strange was trying to do then. But now she would have been dead after Strange had become the Sorcerer Supreme. And by psychic impression and echo, it appears that she has left this sorcery-based carbon copy of her mind, which is now flickering because her magic is fading in this dying universe, and this echo is trying to explain to Strange what she had done.
I drew upon the power of the dark dimension to split the timeline, allowing for 2 of your possible timelines to occur in one universe.
Yes, so as the Ancient One did in the 2016 film, she used magic from the dark dimension. That's why she had the symbol on her head. That's why Caecilius would call her a hypocrite. But it's interesting how the Ancient One's words remind us that timelines and universes are not synonymous and interchangeable. They're really different structural categories, because branch timelines coexist within one universe. Similar to how in Loki, branch timelines could snake off of the sacred timeline, but that all of those existed within the same universe, and that the more branches from that sacred timeline make that bigger universe less stable. So in the end, when it splintered off into thousands and thousands of different branches, that whole universe was one of infinite more. But I love the audio distortion effect on the Ancient One's words, but notice how the distortion
feel like I'm in class.
Multiverse 101.
Succeeds in reversing an absolute point in our universe.
You mean saving Christine?
He cannot save her, Stephen. The resulting temporal paradox will destroy this universe.
So Wong hooks up Strange with a protection spell.
Guardian Vishanti.
Heavy-duty protection spell.
Yes, the Vishanti are actually a trio of godlike entities, Oshter, Hogoth, and Agamotto, who serve as patrons for the Sorcerer Supreme, those who sit above, and the seal of Vishanti that forms the Sanctum window is referencing these Vishanti. And I like how the runes burn into his face. These are actually the same ones that swarmed the alternate Strange in the Cagliostro Temple, which remember, he could handle one at a time, but the swarm of them collectively was a bit overwhelming for him, which explains why this Strange is able to, for most of the battle, stay evenly matched. As they talk to each other, Strange Supreme rages, and you can see for a moment shadows of the other absorbed entities burst out of him in fire, including a claw and a horned animal skull. And he takes them back to the scene of the crash. For a brief shot, you can see the broken windshield glass refracting the form of good Strange, showing how he is from a broken reality, and in this case might be a bit less fit for battle. And then they duel! Strange Supreme uses the beastly demons inside him. He turns his hand into tentacles to break through Good Strange's shield, and then he deploys sandworms. And then the two cloaks of levitation square off, but then Good Strange's cloak sacrifices himself. You can even hear a pained little scream when he tears apart.
Isn't it weird how that really, it felt like a pet dying in that moment, didn't it?
Yeah, like, well, I mean, it's a living thing in this universe.
I didn't realize like how much I cared about that cloak until in that moment I'm like, no!
Buddy, no!
Oh, man.
Get your own bug cloak. Leave him alone.
That was a heartbreaking moment, man. Justice for Cloak.
Strange Supreme distracts him with his orb of light and then creeps up behind him to drag him into a shadow realm. Might even be using Strange's ability to see the Watcher and to distracting him that might just be the Watcher, but no, it's actually his shadow self. And then he uses the inky dark matter that people are melting into to form the memory of Christine, but Good Strange realizes it's an illusion and Strange Supreme punches him out of it, shattering like a glass pane. You can see those shards falling with them. Another example of how reality, even a small pocket reality like this one, takes the form of a delicate crystal just on the verge of shattering. Shockingly, Strange Supreme defeats him and absorbs his other self, and the Eye of Agamotto turns red, along with those runic rings around his wrist, which would normally, of course, glow green, but this is no longer manipulation of time, but manipulation of reality, like the red reality stone, but also like Wanda Maximoff's chaos magic. Red meaning less orderly and more insidious. Strange's final form is a freak. It includes tattered wings, tentacles, horns, hooved feet, and multiple eyes just plopped randomly all over the face. Now again, the name Mephisto never gets spoken in this episode, but the demonic nature of Strange's transformation speaks for itself. Like notice when he says her name, his voice is accompanied by separate whispers.
Christine.
Yeah.
And as he leans into Christine, his extra eyes all twitch independently of each other. And as his reality's final pieces crumble apart, these other entities suddenly vacate his body. Because you could argue these mystic entities might have come out on top, hijacking this Sorcerer Supreme to destroy his own universe. So when Obang said mystic entities don't bargain, the fact that one of those could have been Dormammu could mean that Dormammu won that battle after all. That all these entities, down to that little gnome, might have been victorious here.
Oh, that would be even more of a tragic twist, and I would love it. If when Obang says that line to him, the main takeaway from that scene was actually the line about love that Obang has. But that line in particular, I kept wondering like what he really meant by that, because it transitioned into the whole thing of maybe he's right, they don't bargain, because he was trying to negotiate with the Squid One. So instead he decided to start taking them.
But maybe even when they're inside, they won't go along with whatever his whim is. Maybe they'll just, you know, find a way to enact their own through him.
Like how could he be stronger than them?
Yeah, absolutely. With so many inside to keep in order.
And also because the Ancient One does bring up later in the episode that she has to go down this path because you're the one who defeats Dormammu. If he absorbed Dormammu and Dormammu is the one who actually won in the end, that would make all that foreshadowing that much more impactful. And I just love how it works on like a deeper level in that regard.
Strange begs the Watcher for help.
I read about you, sensed your presence. You're a god. You can undo this.
I'm not a god. And neither are you.
If Strange had read about Uatu the Watcher, that would imply there might have been others in this universe powerful enough to have witnessed or sensed the Watcher's presence in the past. Who else in this MCU could be aware of Watchers? Perhaps Kang or He Who Remains? Maybe the Ancient One? Maybe even Wanda Maximoff, who did suddenly see someone while reading that Darkhold in the WandaVision post-credit scene. But Strange is left tragically alone, clutching Christine as she melts away in his hands, similar to Peter Parker dusting in Tony Stark's hands.
I'm sorry. I am so sorry.
One life, one choice, one moment can destroy the entire universe.
And as the episode goes to credits, we are just left with this feeling like some kind of grim cautionary tale, but for whom exactly? Now, sure, you can see this is a lesson about the dangers
I really
of
gotta
too
stop
much
sorcerers out there.
Cannot be fixed. But the most impactful images of this episode are the tale of a wizard who goes too far. And none of us are sorcerers with the ability to reverse time or rewrite reality. Well, yet. Working on some stuff on the side. I really think this episode just seems like a taste of the horrors to come.
Exactly.
As characters
It's
in the
setting
Marvel
up the
world
stakes for the
face
future.
Multiversal madness, especially in the live action universe. That's why I think it's definitely worth considering this episode as having actual implications on titles like No Way Home and Multiverse of Madness. Because it's the first episode this season that did not use a single sound-alike actor, as if this live action cast knows the importance of this story on their characters' journeys. And yes, it reintroduces that multiversal monster that seems like it could tie into Multiverse of Madness or even Shang-Chi. So there was a time when folks were not sure if Marvel's What If was essential watching, but now I think it is clear this is essential rewatching. You can support New Rockstars by checking out all of our merch options.
Yeah, this episode is a game changer.
Shirt that when you get, you can write in a custom shout out that will appear on our What If After shows. Get all of that at newrockstarsmerch.com. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EAVoss. Follow and subscribe to New Rockstars. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Brilliant video, man. Love the hell out
Eric.
of it. Thank you, Eric. All right, guys, subscribe to New Rockstars if you haven't done so already. Hit that notification bell for us, hit that like button, and we'll catch you guys soon.